All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our talk of how three breweries have used data management to grow. My name is Pulkit Agrawal. I also go by PK, and I am the founder and CEO of the Fifth Ingredient. My backstory, real quick, is that I studied mechanical engineering at Harvard, then left and started working at Ballast Point Brewing in San Diego, California, as a process engineer, where I really focused on the packaging equipment and diving in a bit more into process efficiencies. Left and started the Fifth Ingredient with the idea that, the four ingredients in beer: water, malt, hops, and yeast, and the fifth ingredient is data. And really, that's where Beer 30 eventually came about, with a thought process that let's actually help breweries use their data to make better beer, better decisions, and actually start looking at how do you actually optimize your entire brewery. And so today I'm joined by three friends of mine in the industry. We have Brian Bullard, co-founder and owner of ONCO Fermentations. We have Marty Bills, who is the director of brewing operations for Pelican Brewing. And we have Will Glass, who is the founder of the Brewing Projekt. And this is going to be so exciting because all three individuals joining me today are very unique in the fact that they are all operating three very different sized breweries. And with that, they all still share a very common theme of doing more than just tracking data. And they're actually really focused on the insights that they've gained from that data to focus on brewery growth and processes. And really, as we as a community start looking at the way the industry is just evolving into the future, data is going to be key for the whole insights aspect of things. And so I'm really looking forward to this. If anybody has questions throughout, feel free to put them in the comments section. We'll see them on our end and we'll be able to address them. And there's going to be some time at the end as well to get into details. So this is going to be great. Really excited for this. So with that, let's start off. Brian, on your end. We've known each other since you were just about to start with your facility. And so could you please just start off and tell us more about yourself and your brewery and kind of your vision of building out your brewery?
So we've been open 2.5 years now. Our 1 year anniversary was the day they shut everything down in New York State over COVID. So that really made us think outside the box the last couple of years, or the year and a half. We are a small brewery in central New York. We right now looking at doing only 300 barrels this year, but we've actually started on a pace now that we'll be pushing the 400 to 600 barrel mark on a 3.5 barrel system. Um, like I said, this last year has made us think way outside the box. We started distro. We've hired a sales manager. He actually has been part-time throughout this year, but he will be full-time as of next year. And it's been an interesting ride. So
That's awesome. And congrats to you as well. I know that Erin, your wife, is now full time at ONCO as well. So that's pretty exciting.
yeah, we'll see. She handles all the marketing. She handles all the tap room scheduling, running the tap room. It took us a while to learn our place in the brewery, separate, but we still bounce things off of each other. So I handle all the brewing aspects. She handles, like I said, the tap room, but she also is getting involved with the sales also, just as a support on that. So
That's awesome. Really cool. So switching things up, Will, you're up next. So, the Brewing Projekt is definitely known for its like split batch variations and like the innovation that it does where it takes a base beer like Dairy Mighty Things or Puff Tart and then adds in all these different adjuncts and different flavor combinations and these really cool beers. So what's the story behind, the Brewing Projekt and the whole interest in split batch variations, and tell us more about all that, please.
Sure, yeah. I think we're like 7 years old. We might be 6 years old. I might be missing something. My background, my first job in beer was working for Miller Coors. Kind of branched out from there and became a retailer. So my wife and I started a craft beer bar in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And to be perfectly honest, we had a hell of a time getting a lot of really unique, independently owned craft beers at that point in time. And that was about 12 years ago. And I got really sick and tired of people asking for certain styles of beer, and people who were upset why, in a town of 70, 80,000, why we couldn't get this type of beer or that type of beer. So the next logical progression was, as an entrepreneur, was to fill that void. So I spun off and started the Brewing Projekt, and the idea was really to make interesting beers and to continue to kind of push and make beers that people were really excited about that we didn't have access to in northwestern Wisconsin. That has grown. It grew fast. It grew organically in a way that I never expected it to. We have distribution in 17 states and something stupid like 25 countries that I can't keep track of because it switches up and changes on a regular basis as to who's taking what and where container ships can go and where they can't go. So that's been very interesting. But it really has grown from people complaining about not being able to get Scotch ales to people wanting just really ridiculous beers with a whole lot of marshmallow added to them, or God knows what other kind of crazy stuff we do on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, we started off with a lot of series, and now we just have a lot of different beers. I think last year we had 135 unique products. About a third of those were variants, so it was one variant split off into another, and just kind of we roll from there. So we've always, it's kind of cliche to say that you push the boundaries of what beer is because pretty much everything has been done. I'm just really not even sure what's going to come next, but we'll see, and we'll try to be a part of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that our customers are happy and they're getting what they want. So we'll keep giving them what they want.
That's awesome, and I think you recently launched the whole bomb seltzer project of yours, and diving in on hard seltzers. Tell us more about that, please, and how that ties in.
Yeah. So I had my first seltzer 9 months ago. It was just something that I had never really had an interest in trying, and then somebody handed one to me in a hot tub. I was like, damn, this is kind of perfect. I mean, you're sitting in a hot tub, you're sitting there hot and sweaty, and you might as well drink something like that. So we kind of spun it up and did our own take on it. It is more, our seltzers are more like a cocktail than they are like a flavored water. Definitely pack more punch. They're all at 6% or higher. So it's just been something fun to do, something that we bounce around, and it's taken off, and just kind of like a lot of things, it's exceeded our expectations.
That's awesome. Congrats to that. That's great, Will. Cool, Marty. So let's switch off to your world. So first off, congrats. I know that Pelican has been in business for 25 years now, which is really awesome and just really epic on its own as well. It's again really cool to see, Brian's journey of just starting up 2 years ago. Will is kind of in that growth phase, and Pelican and Marty, you guys are kind of in that more established as well. So tell us more about the brewery and your role and how you've been involved at Pelican.
Right on. Well, Pelican has been in business for 25 years, and the brewmaster here, Darren Welch, and I have been in the business exactly the same amount of time. I was kind of in between having a couple of chemistry degrees as an undergraduate and on my way off to graduate school when I stopped into a brewery, and have been waylaid now for 26 years or whatever it's been, and really love the business of brewing. I've been at Pelican here on the Oregon coast for 6 years almost, and it's pretty glorious. Pelican has a great tradition of quality and participation in things like the GABF and awards and things like that. And so there's a great quality standard here when I got here, and they were just starting to get really serious about distribution. So we are going to be close to 50,000 barrels this year. We run both bottling and canning. When everybody was jumping into cans, we bought a new bottling line, and that allowed us to get a bunch of shelf space. It was pretty cool. And then, the writing was on the wall. So in 2019, we put in a can line, and that's been going great. We're going to be into 3 packages. Right now, we're running 19.2 cans and 12-ounce cans. And the lines are going like this. Bottling was flat last year, but down a little bit this year, whereas cans are just going crazy. So we were very, very fortunate with that. We have 2 big brew pubs now on the Oregon coast, with the third that'll be done in Lincoln City in March. And we, like everyone, had to change our business models a little bit with COVID, and we took it seriously and figured out how to do space tables and make sure people were safe, keep our own people safe, keep the community safe. And that has gone pretty well. I had a huge package year last year because everybody was sitting home. And that was fortunate because our can line was just finally kind of up and running and going great guns. And love the business, love the things that go on. We're for a brewery our size, we're try to be on the cutting edge of innovation in our QA/QC department. So data management is really important for us. And yeah, that's how we found Beer 30. So here we are.
That's awesome. We're definitely going to dive into that as well, Marty, and hear more about the growth aspect of things. So this is great. Thank you all for the introductions. And so let's circle back to the main topic about actually using data for growth. So Brian, I'll start off with you on things. So one of the most interesting aspects that I love about the way ONCO has started off is that from day one, you were using a data management platform, right? And you've looked at it from the very beginning about consistency and high quality at a nano brewery side of things. So can you tell us more about how you actually use this data on a day-to-day basis and diving in more on the quality side of things, please?
We too do. We actually have over 100 beers in our profile, even though we're small. Again, most of that was driven by COVID, trying to keep things interesting, that shiny penny. And now some of those beers are starting to come around more and more that we rotate through our tap list. And being new, being small, consistency and trying to tweak the beers and track that using a program has been key to us so far. So we've been upping our quality throughout the process, making one small change or one minor change at a time, and watching how it tracks throughout the whole process from basically grain to glass. So it's been key.
That's awesome. And how do you think at this point, when you're like diving in on just like hours in the day, right? I mean, especially as you're doing these variations and things, how do you foresee data management helping you out when it comes to streamlining and the hours that you're saving, or how's that investment going for you?
That's why we looked at it to begin with. We started looking at doing spreadsheets, everything that way, time management. And being small, I was actually the only one full-time on, so I was handling everything from getting tap rooms ready to brewing to packaging, cleaning, the whole 9 yards throughout the whole process. My wife still handled marketing at that point, but she had a full-time job then. So I had to figure out a way to streamline. And the only way to do that was looking at different programs. And you were also somewhat new at that time.
Yeah, you were our first New York client. That was pretty awesome.
Yes, we were.
The fifth
Not how
ingredient
many you have
actually,
now, but we were the first ones.
yeah, the fifth ingredient actually just hit its 4-year mark yesterday, actually. So that's we were getting up there as well, just like you, Brian, on that growth side of things.
But we were, looking at different programs. Others were way too large for us at that time. You were excited about where the Beer 30 could go. Really, and still are, interested in how it works from a brewer's aspect, not just from putting a program out there and going and making tweaks along the way with that. So that was interesting for us. I know early on we got into the barrel program, getting that out there, which now we finally have space going in to really amp that up. But it was something that was needed in order to have my hands in on everything else. We had to streamline, and it's been great so far.
That's awesome. I think in your case, you're also, for your growth aspect, you're also doing sensory panels and sensory training, right? So
Yeah.
how's that going to dive into the growth aspect and brewery management overall?
We're really going to start to kick that off even more next year. Our sales guy that we hired, or that's been with us for a while, he's actually going for his 3rd level Cicerone. And we've been working on paper how to put everything into motion. We've actually started to take the sensory aspect, add all the qualities that we want in there to look for each beer. We're going to start spreading that throughout all our taproom staff, those that are interested, and be able to compare, like I said, since we're doing these small tweaks, what is everybody tasting, or
Sure.
Is it better quality? Is it hurting the product? And hopefully we'll be able to grow from there and keep the beers going, more and more consistent and consistent in quality growth. So.
Very cool. That's awesome. Thank you, Brian. Will, switching over a bit to you, with your combinations as well, similar to kind of how Brian was talking about, in your case, you're actually doing a lot with adjuncts and fruits and spices and things like that. So talk to me a little bit about how you're using data from the quality lens of things first when it really comes to, potential issues that may come up when you're adding in these types of ingredients and and flavorings and things like that. So we'd love to get your thoughts on the innovation side and quality that dives in together with the Brewing project.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just I think one of the really great things about what you've created is the ability for us to kind of customize the checks and process checks as things go. When COVID was really at its height last year, we were splitting our staff up to be just super cautious and making sure that we only had like 2 people who could possibly interact with one another. But what that created was a lot of, well, did somebody do this or did somebody do that? And what we found worked really well with Beer 30 was the ability to add in a positive check. A positive is this ready to package? Has this process been done? It also made it a lot easier for us to focus on process improvement, because when we had communication with our staff and with the guys who, down on the floor actually doing the physical tasks, whereas we used to have a lot of confusion and we'd be sending a lot of text messages and we'd be sending a lot of, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? We were able to see, was this checked off? Was it added? Was it removed from inventory? Was it something that got done that said that it was going to get done? And we've been able to really kind of cross-check that through the systems that are inside of Beer 30, and that's been awesome. From a quality standpoint, because we do have so many touch points throughout the process, just adding in those custom checks, was there an RTP or not an RTP, an ATP check done on this? Was there an HLP tube prepared and processed after this specific process? So, in a lot of ways, I think that a lot of people, and we started there as well, was by using spreadsheets. And man, is that just tough? Is that difficult, especially when you get a bunch of people trying to use the same thing? So having the ability for basically everybody on our team to be able to just pull out their phone, log into Beer 30, and have a really simple process by which to make sure that everything is getting done has been awesome. We implemented a couple of the other non-Beer 30 software options in the past. We tried to do it twice with one and once with a third one, and it didn't go well. And honestly, slowing down production to be able to keep up with data was a real pain point, and we don't have that with Beer 30. So I think that what we've got going now really works. It's a simple program to use, the ability for us to customize what we need to customize to our process and to be able to jump in and add things, and the responsiveness of PK and his team has been really great. I wish that Jess could chime in. Jess's office is on the other side of the wall from where I am right now. She's the one who deals with most of the stuff, but it's been great. And to be able to really keep track of where things need to be and making sure that things are being done the way that they've been, basically formulated to be done has been awesome. Something had a really difficult time keeping track of in the past. We don't have those same difficulties anymore.
And Will, I love the fact that you're really diving into the day-to-day operations of it. So can you dive in more on like the real-time data aspect and like the benefits that, because if you think about it, right, people that are watching this, maybe they're at that point right now of getting spreadsheets up and running, right? Or maybe they're like, hey, I'll jot this down on a piece of paper, and then, later at the end of shift, I'll put it into a spreadsheet or into a software. So I love how you're talking about real time. So coming back to our topic about growth, how does the real time aspect dive in with growth?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that we've battled with and struggled with forever is just what is the right amount of staff to have. Right now we've got basically 16 full-time production staff, and we continue to come back to what is the bottleneck? Where's our bottleneck? How do we need to change up? How do we need to grow? How do we change things up so that things really work well? And for us, it just continues to come back to packaging. So one of the areas where we've been able to look at is not only when did a packaging run start, when was their downtime? So if they had to, break off for lunch, or a bearing broke, like I've got a bearing sitting on my desk here that screwed up a packaging run. We had to pull things apart. But having that data in front of us and knowing exactly where it is, and to me, I think real time data is great. I've got the dashboard up and I can see what's happening right now. But to be able to look back and know when things happened and at what time they happened, to me is just awesome. I mean, that helps us to really nail down how long something should take, how long it should have maybe taken, or looking at something and seeing, okay, they said that took an hour. That's like a 3 or 4 hour task. So what happened there? Being able to kind of backtrack and figure that stuff out has been really important. So as far as growth is concerned, having this as a tool and knowing that we can kind of look back and see and identify issues and bottlenecks, not only when they happen, but after they've happened, in a way that, it would be very difficult to rely on somebody's memory, is really, really awesome. Even things like, we just did a pretty deep dive on what our waste looked like. We're forecasting out can consumption for next year. And, Jess, who I just mentioned, and I were looking at what that can consumption meant and how many truckloads we needed. And being able to see that and quantify things like waste when they happened, what exactly that waste was assigned to, how long things took, and be able to identify discrepancies or even outliers has been really awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because Brian, you're talking about using something like Beer 30 and data management from one person mentality of like having to do everything. And at that point, it's great to
I feel so minuscule here, but that's okay.
No, dude, you're crushing it. I mean, the thing that I love about, bringing up ONCO is that you are really able to, dive in from the nano brewery perspective of things, right? Where when it's just a one person operation, having that source of truth is huge because you're running at 5,000 miles an hour, just like adding things here and there. So that becomes very interesting. And then, Will, in your case, you're just all about, okay, how do we start delegating to different people and keeping a track of who's doing things correctly? Which, Brian, with your new hires coming on, that's going to be your next step anyway. So,
and that's why we decided to go with a program right away, is so we could build into it and not have to start the learning curve all over again. I mean, That was our whole mentality, was from day one, let's just bite the bullet, do a time saver for myself, but then it also has allowed me to take our SOPs and how do we now manage that through a program and hopefully transform that to what our employees do.
That's super interesting.
You are really smart to have done that.
Nice. Yes, that's both of you. And Marty, maybe you have that as well. But it looks like the whole SOP side and using, the whole data management aspect for SOPs for people is huge for everybody here as well for growth.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's really cool. And so, Marty, in your case, you've been in the industry 25 plus years at this point. So from your spectrum of things and your transitions with new innovation and tools that are happening, how have you seen data evolve for Pelican as an example? And just what have been the checkpoints and ways that data has constantly improved Pelican to get to the place that it's at today?
Well, I'll start off with a tangent. Brian, I grew up just north of Ithaca, New York, and I just had to look you up and find out you were 30 minutes. And I can't tell you the last time I was in Tully, New York, if I ever was.
There's lots of cows and corn here, but we're right off of 81.
Yeah, I've been up and down 81 a whole lot, but that's about as close as I ever been. But that's funny. So for Pelican, we come at it from a little bit different way. When I came to Pelican, we were using a different kind of web-based brewery management tool, which was better than some MRP, ERP stuff that I'd used, but different. So our whole production model is really just in time. We run a lot of packages, and we want that distributor inventory to be fresh. It's not uncommon for our, to be able to go to a grocery store shelf in Portland, Oregon, and pick up beer that's 2 weeks old, and that's with an 18-day mandate from our distributors, for them to hold 18 days of inventory. So we were, as we grew rapidly over the course of the last few years, we really needed to start leaning on MRP, ERP style tools for production planning. And cans, of course, complicate everything because they're pre-printed. When we were just in bottles, you can slap any label you want on a bottle and away you go. But when you've got to store, truckloads of pre-printed cans, things get pretty kludgy pretty quickly. So we needed to be able to do a high level of planning to make sure we were servicing our wholesale customers, our retail customers, and our end users effectively. And to be able to look at our scaling as we move throughout the year as these different product lines went up and down. That was the MRP. The unfortunate thing is that the MRP we invested in had zero visibility on the brew house. And so just what you were talking about, Will, and what you're talking about, Brian, God, I couldn't go back to spreadsheets. We had tools in Smartsheet, we had tools in spreadsheets, and we were blind. And when I found the fifth ingredient, I had long since gotten past the point of putting my email address in a web page. I mean, it's just like, who am I going to get spammed by? But I was so freaking desperate because I had no visibility on brewhouse operations. I was taking me hours to try to figure out what had been done and whatnot in this giant database. It was just ridiculous. And people didn't know how to update because it was so not intuitive. So they'd wait till the end of the day and then not update. And it was so far from real time and everybody was confused. And if you hit enter and it was wrong, then basically my brewery manager would have to clean it up to make sure that we were back in production mode. It was a disaster. And it still is in some ways. So anyway, to shorten that story up, I was looking specifically for how to better manage what was going on in the brew house and how that transitions into the packaging hall. And that's when we started our relationship with PK and Ryan. And we were pretty happy about it right away. I mean, we got the dashboard on fermentation. We were running 25 fermenters at this place. We were running 4 in Cannon Beach restaurant at the time. We were running 4 at the PC restaurant. We'll have 6 at the Siletz Bay restaurant. And those things are pretty integrated. Yes, we brew beer for those pubs, but we also do R&D work, and that needs to funnel up. We need to be able to look at that data to see how it's going to transition into frontline beers. We need to be able to handhold those things. Oftentimes we're brewing specialty for our draft sales teams in those pubs, and they need to know where that information is. And so it really allowed us to fold that together. The other thing we did in the time, how long have we been with Beer 30? 3 years?
Month and a half. Oh, sorry, a year and a half. Sorry, yeah, about a year and a half.
We had taken a big investment in our analytical equipment in our QA/QC area. So we needed a way to be able to take the information that we're getting off our GCMS, look at it batch by batch, chart it, use that information to optimize our process and streamline. Every time you optimize, for us, every time we optimize a day can mean the difference between having to buy fermenters or not. And
let's dive in on that real quick, Marty. So from a quality perspective and growth, it seems like by comparing batches of beer on top of one another, how do you then translate that into, shaving off tank residencies and actually getting more turns out of the same tank? Because I think for growth, all of us have gone through that aspect of adding in new tanks and the capital that comes with that. Can you talk a little bit about your growth aspect and how you're using data management and quality to shave away times for tank residency and actually churning more beers out?
Yeah, I think it really started with us. The first thing we did on the GC was DMS. So the first thing we did was shave 15 minutes off our boil time on our 30-barrel brew house kettle. So that was, money in the bank. And we thought, okay, well, that was a pretty simple analysis. And when we started to move into VDK analysis, it really allowed us to take our sensory program and blend it with an analytical program, so we could look at our VDK uptake curves, really, this really visual, be able to pull this up in just a couple of seconds and start seeing and comparing with some of our peers in the industry of what we were doing in the fermentation process. So that led to programs of optimization for oxygenation. It ended yeast management, all of these things, how we dialed in those aspects became visual in Beer 30. And we, if we were just looking at it in database screens, I mean, it was just impossible. It was just, yes, you could data dump out to Excel, and if you had enough hours left in your life, you could you could make tables in Excel and do that and make pretty graphs and things like that. But where was it? Was everybody recording it in the same way? That really helped us modernize our fermentation. We do a lot of ales and some lagers, and we do our specialty stuff in the brew pubs. So learning a lot about, 3 house yeast strains plus the ones we do in the pubs, modernizing our usage of the predominant ale strain, once again, data management from the lab through Beer 30, visualize it, track it, make changes, visualize it, track it. It made it really, really slick.
Nice.
And I don't
sorry, I was going to say, so then the graphing and visualization, how did that change the communication amongst the team as well for that?
Well, in lots of ways, initially it was just making sure it was a validation of process. So we would make a change. We would be able to do that, what Brian discussed, one thing at a time and measure it. One thing at a time, measure it, make those steps forward, and keep everybody in the brew team up to date on that. Up to the point where we actually have a custom dashboard that I wrangled Ryan and Pulkit into, which allows us a leading indicator on one of our premier brands. So we had to modernize how we were putting volumes into a tank, and to optimize what would come out of the tank. And so now, if a brewer hits the top line volume, we're pretty certain of what's going to come off the centrifuge, and that then serves as a leading indicator for how our costing for the month is going. So I mean, there's lots of avenues on that, but that dashboard sits up there every day, and people can measure their personal progress without us having to do anything. We got this volume in, we got this volume out, we managed the tank bottoms correctly, and the cellar did its job. Yeast came off at the right time. The beer was processed in the right amount of time, and it's being packaged, and everybody can see that in real time. And it doesn't require anybody go dig into a database. It doesn't require anybody make a spreadsheet. It doesn't, and once your people realize that they're competing with themselves for greatness, it really is gratifying.
Nice.
Rather than say, well, you didn't hit your numbers this week. Why didn't you hit your numbers this week? They know today whether or not they hit their numbers. And those leading indicators really are a great core driver. So
nice.
Turning it into a game.
Yeah, absolutely. So turning it into a bit of a game, even within the breweries. So that way the teams are kind of like, quote unquote, in a friendly, competitive manner, helping each other excel and just keep on, brewing hard, shaving off time, and keeping the quality and consistency going.
Yeah, and that's also, I think everybody who works, at least in this business, wants to do a great job. And sometimes people just don't know what a great job means. It means different things at different times. Sometimes it's about maximizing volume. Sometimes it's about, maximizing finesse. If you're working in a brew pub and you're looking for a certain amount of fruit flavor, you're looking for a certain amount of residual extract, or whatever that is, success is different depending on the project. And, a big part of success in a production brewery is throughput. It's not all we do, thankfully, because that can get pretty boring. But if you're hitting that stuff, it can make people feel successful every day.
Awesome. Definitely. That's a really cool point for sure. Brian, shifting over to your world, man. So really going into the future now, and I know you're saying that you're at this growth phase now of hitting the 400 to 600 barrel mark, and really that's doubling your production completely, right? And the one thing I love about that is that so many people listening in are in that phase of maybe having the idea of, should I start my own nano brewery, and then getting to the point of, great, we're literally doubling capacity right now. So what are your aspects of, using data to understand how you're going to double your capacity and really get more out of what your current system is, or how's that whole process looking like for you?
Marty hit on some of that. Just watching your tank utilization, how long it's sitting in there, how, whether you're hitting your numbers, your VDK, everything like that. It comes down to how many days, I want to say it in a wrong way, but can you shave off your time without hurting quality and turning the tanks. And then once you can't do that anymore, then you're adding tanks to brew into. We're in the process of adding another 34. We just took over another 3,400 square feet. 1,000 of that's going to be for barrels. So, now we're adding in not only our day to day, but everything that we're aging long term, which is increasing our brewing capacity also in a sense. I mean, long term, but hopefully it all comes out. But yeah, from doing this pretty much from day one, getting the SOPs, it's been easier to add in employees. I have one gentleman that helps me out on Wednesdays. He has another job, but he doesn't like to sit around, so he comes in here and helps. And it was easy to show him, this is what we do, this is where we log it, this is the process, go. And it's right there in front of him. So it's made that transition easier. And hopefully, as we grow more and more, we'll be able to keep that going to where it's a simple process.
Nice. And then from the growth aspect, what's really great about that is you start getting into this realm that not only is something like the Beer 30 or data management the central source of truth for the brewery, now you start getting into these subsets of SOPs that are the source of truth for the brewery. So that way people know exactly what to do, when to do, and how to exactly do it.
Yeah. And another aspect of it is the distribution module. Since we're in New York and we have a farm brew combined license, but one of them's farm brewery, we can self-distro. So we track everything through that also, from keg management, where it's located, who has what, how long it's been sitting there, has it been on tap yet? So we know going into the future that we can sit there and say, okay, we've been selling them X number of kegs or cans. They haven't put it on yet. Do we want to keep pushing sales that way or shift it to another customer that wants our product? So
very cool.
That's been helpful to track all of that. It's not just on the brewing side, it's the distro side too.
Absolutely. So using the growth aspect to not only focusing on the brewing aspects, but where's the product going, the whole distribution side, product traceability side associated with that.
Correct.
Very cool. And Will, on your end, sticking to the theme of like innovation that we're all talking about, how does something like a data management platform help you when it comes to understanding the bottom line, right? And the profitability for growth, understanding cost of goods. And really a lot of people look at, COGS and try to dive in on, well, I have these numbers, what do I do with it now? So tell me a little bit more about how that ties in, especially with the innovation and bottom line and the merging of the two.
Sure. Yeah, I think I can tell a pretty embarrassing story about like 4 or 5 years ago, when we really started seeing, how far we could push some of these ingredients. We weren't really keeping very good track of how much we were charging for our beer, and all of a sudden, we were like, oh gosh, it seems like a lot of money to charge $10 for a 4-pack of beer, and then a few months later, we were like, oh shit, we really shouldn't. We should look at how much this is costing us. And then we figured out that it was costing us like $9.20 to make that 4-pack of beer. And then we totally backed up and changed the price. And we explained to everybody basically a mea culpa that, hey, turns out we're just dumb and we have no idea how much we should be charging for this. Sorry, everybody, but the price is going up $4. And honestly, we had a couple of people on social media call us dumb, and it was like, well, we know we're dumb. But we figured it out. And we have since fixed that. But because of all of the different beers that we make, it would be very difficult. And we make a lot of changes kind of last minute in the bright tank, be it from an adjuncting standpoint or, a post-acidification. So keeping track of the costs has turned out to be something that's really, really important. And a big part of it has to do with the fact that you can't stay in business if you aren't making money. And I don't know about any of you, but we're all kind of doing this to be able to make a living, right? So being able to track down to in some cases the ounce or the gram on how much some of these ingredients cost. Most of them aren't that far broken down, but some things really are. and it can push a beer from being, say, like a tier 3 beer to a tier 4 beer. And if we're not making our margins at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to stay in business for very long. So being able to really track those cost of goods and be able to make sure that we're backing into what is the appropriate tier is super, super important. I mean, we just this morning we're talking about some additional adjunct that was needed in a certain beer that's a Halloween themed beer that absolutely has to be packaged by Friday. And then we were backing into, okay, we're going to have to overnight that, and that's going to cost an additional $340. But I know that because of the way that we're entering that data and that we're keeping track of it, that we're going to make sure that that is included in what the cost of goods sold is. You know, if we weren't really on top of that, that's the kind of thing that would slip through the cracks. That's the kind of thing that really kind of affects your margin in a way that if you're not paying attention to it because you've got 100 other things that you're dealing with, you know, as brewery owners or operations managers, you know, this is an awfully complex business that we're in. You know, we're not just making a single widget on a daily basis. So there's a lot to keep track of, and what Pulkit and Ryan have made makes it a hell of a lot easier to keep track of that stuff. And I know, because we keep track of it, that we are able to operate in the black and we are able to hit our margins because there is an easy way for us to keep track of that. And it kind of comes back to what I touched on earlier with operators, right? Is if, you know, one person comes in and they see a recipe or maybe something got changed, and we know that they put something in that I don't want to say didn't necessarily belong there, but let's say that they put in twice as much of something as should have been there. We can keep track of that, and we can make sure that we're not, you know, cutting ourselves short on what is our margin to be able to stay in business and stay successful.
So it's great because you're using it both from the recipe formulation side, and I love the idea of overnighting an ingredient, right? Because so many people like forget to include shipping and or taxes when they start looking at COGS, and that becomes an asset, like a recipe formulation. Where is it worth the 1 day, 2 day, or like 5 day shipping? And then on the other end, it seems like you're using it from the sales side to then dive in from this is what we should actually cost our beer. And how are you then including things like overall as a company for like overhead, labor, rent, you know, things like that? How are you incorporating that as a whole in just your growth aspect of things?
Sure. Yeah. You know, one thing that I'll say is that we have never designed a beer on a budget, and I think that we're in a really fortunate place that we have a customer base that's more than happy to pay, you know, $25-$30 for a 4-pack of beer. I mean, that's bonkers. That's not the market and the business that I grew up in this industry in, but it's definitely where it's gone. And we're fortunate to have those customers that are happy and willing to pay those prices for those beers. But we wouldn't be able to accurately track it, and we wouldn't be able to really know without having that data management. And you know, we've also made decisions as far as, you know, how long do we tie up a tank with a low margin beer? How much do we tie up a tank with a high margin beer? And, you know, that has affected some of our decisions as far as some of the beers that we've made. You know, during our busy season, when we need twice as many people and twice as much fermentation capacity, you got to make business decisions based on, you know, how do we keep the lights on? How do we make sure that we're going in the right direction from a financial standpoint? Some of that other stuff about, you know, Pulkit, where you mentioned, you know, overhead, that's an area that I think we need to improve specifically on. It's something that as we're looking at diversifying our business and how we continue, we need to get a better handle on that. And that's something that I look forward to diving more into. And I'm not going to lie, we've got a whiteboard out there in the main office tracking some of that stuff so we can figure it out right now. But that's something that we will look at, kind of re-injecting back into the formula and figuring out exactly how to allocate it appropriately. I think that this is kind of comes back to data, right? You can have all the data in the world, but if you don't know what it means and you don't know how to use it, what good is it? So, you know, I think that you guys have done a great job creating a product and a system that helps us pick out the valuable points and helps us identify outliers so that we can go back and look at refinement. So,
nice. That sounds like a great feature request for a future update to help streamline
There
more
you
so
go.
on the labor side. We have some of that right now, but yeah, definitely taking it to the next level. So that's awesome. Really appreciate that, bro.
I think you should, because honestly, this is one area that we're at, is that we have a brewery we're very, very close to, who asked us during our slow season if we could use some of our additional capacity to help them basically contract out where they're at. And then that made us step back and go, oh, we got to figure out how much our overhead truly is, so that we can look at what we allocate those costs to. So yeah, I mean, data is such an important thing, and having it at your fingertips and knowing, where that data came from, and that it is actually all inclusive of what you're trying to figure out is so important. So
That's awesome. Love that. Marty, on your end, right, in a similar vein of that, if you also, as you mentioned right up front, multiple sites, multiple locations, multiple size brew houses, how does that all dive in from a data management growth perspective of just scalability and understanding how to keep track of multiple sizes of things in multiple locations?
Well, probably like everybody, sometimes we're hyper focused on one particular thing and we know a lot about it, and then there's a bunch of things that are going by that
Sure.
get washed out in the mix. And I think what's great, and this kind of touches on both what Brian and Will were talking about, is we have, for example, a beer coming out that just came out this fall. And how we've been able to transition in our year and a half is we know the cost is high on this beer. But we now feel confident between the analytical side and the data management side that we will, without changing the customer perception of that beer, dial that cost down. And that's very common in things like aerospace. They'll take on a new project to build something, and they're not going to make any money for 3 years, but by year 3, they're going to be making a killing. And without good data management and without being able to track progress on things like that, so there's a customer experience. We want that person having that beer on their deck to have a certain experience. So we tell ourselves a story, we design that beer, we try to do our best to make sure those flavors are right. And, then before we start kicking out the door, we look at the cost and it's like, oh my God, can't we just go back to like $8 hops instead of $40 hops or whatever? You know what I mean? But it's often not possible. You want them to have that experience. And I love that model that you have there at the Brewing Projekt, Will, where you've got tiers and that kind of upward flexibility. And we have some of that, but not for much of our frontline stuff. But what we do have through data management is a strong sense that with a year of working on it, our costs will be in line, and within 2 years, we'll be doing great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, we're all very data engineering focused. I think all 4 of us really have that mindset of, data analytics. For people that are listening in right now, and, just to take a step back for a second, let's go back to people listening in who are at that decision of investing in new technology. And as you're thinking about this, right, imagine you're the brewer, you're the filter operator, you're packaging, you're somebody on the team that's looking into this right now, and not necessarily the decision maker, not necessarily the person that's there with it. So how would you pitch this from the business side of things to invest in technology to help you grow your brewery? Right? You're an employee, you want to take your day-to-day to the next level. Each of you, from your perspective, what would you think is the deciding factor, the killer argument that you would give to your boss, you would give to your team to say, this is why we need data management and this is how it's going to help us grow to the next level?
I can tell you straight up that the reason why I am so happy with Beer 30 as opposed to the other ones that we tried was that from a frontline perspective, our guys get it. It's intuitive. It's easy to use. If there's a substitution that needs to be made, it doesn't take an hour's worth of research to figure out why there's a substitution that needs to be made, or a super user to come in and hopefully fix things. Meanwhile, everybody else is standing around, fiddling their thumbs because, well, we can't click a box on our phone. Beer 30 is great in that everyone seems to know how to use it right away. That intuitive factor has been awesome. I am not the best Beer 30 user in this building by a long shot. I'd probably put myself in the bottom 20% of our users as far as functionality is concerned. But in order for somebody to be able to just pick up, an iPad, because we've got iPads downstairs, or even just pull out their phone, it's simple, it's easy to use. And that was somewhere where we really struggled with in the past, where if it was difficult to use, people weren't using it. And if they weren't using it, then you couldn't trust the data. So the ease of use, I think, is the biggest selling point for me. Having tried to implement several times different processes and programs in the past where people got confused or had a hard time figuring it out, we just don't have that problem anymore. Everybody gets it. And because of that, we trust what's actually there. So that's a big selling point for me.
Love it. That's awesome. Brian, how about on your end?
I mean, how much you and your team listen to us also and make adjustments, whether it's a feature we're looking for, or a feature that we'd like to have tweaked, or it's an evolving software that saves everybody time, saved me a lot of time. And like Will said, it is very easy to use. You can train anybody on it. I mean, in less than a day. It's very easy for that switch over from a program they may have used versus like just right in front of you.
Love it.
As Will said, intuitive.
Nice. And Marty, on your end, just the killer argument when you're talking to leadership about getting things implemented, innovating, investing in technology, what comes to mind in your world?
All the things that the other guys said, I mean, for new brewers, you've got to be in the data management game. I mean, for excise tax, for controlling costs, for inventory management, which is all regulated up by almost every state and certainly by the federal government. I mean, you've got to just resign yourself that you're going to have to know where that alcohol is. I mean, that's, so if you're on the fence about something, Beer 30 is the way to go, because it's one of the only platforms that's really progressive about how that human interface goes. And there's a lot of ways to screw it up, and you can spend a lot more money. I mean, I had a funny story I'll share with you. I had to keep pretty good records in my original brewery, and was very savvy with Excel and did things like that. And we had a pretty good database system. And what was it then? The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, just after September 11th, split off and became the Tax and Trade Bureau. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had never really audited a craft brewery because they had set the whole thing up for macro breweries. So they packed 9 auditors to a round table in my office to try to figure out what we were doing. And thankfully, so they had to go through our corporate records, and they had to go through, it was a publicly held corporation, and they had to go through our corporate records, and they had to go through all our excise taxes. And they go, and then they came up with these boxes of register tapes, from 10-key punch style registers. They're like, how do you tell what's a pint and what's a thing of French fries? It's like, I don't know. Maybe we can figure it out together, but I don't have any clue. And they were like, how are we going to audit these craft brewers? I don't know if they ever figured it out, but they did spend 3 weeks in my office, which was utterly awful, right? It was a terrible life experience. I don't recommend it. And then one of the Seattle brewers called me up, and at the end of it, the only reprieve was like, hey, they're coming to our brewery next. Did you have like batch notes? I was like, yeah, at every batch we ever brew check. Because I've got like yellow tablets that have my brews on them from like 10 years of doing that. You think they'll take that? And I'm like, and they were 4 times the size of it at the time. And I'm serious. This is like early 2000s stuff, right? And he was like, I literally didn't know how to answer that question. I do not know if you've got your malt and your hops written down on a yellow tablet, if the federal government's going to take that. It was just lunacy. So I thought I was in bad shape. They were in atrocious shape, and that was just it. Nobody had ever thought to regulate it, but this is a heavily regulated business, and nobody wants to spend any time. You don't want to hire any brewers or admin people to do that stuff. Sure. And so if you're brewers, if you're assistant brewers, if your packaging people are keeping up on this data, so you don't have to. God, start it early. Start it early. Understand your costs early. Understand your, what your tax burden is. Understand what your liabilities are early. because man, you don't want to be in that guy's thing, because I don't know what happened there. I never heard the other side of the story, but I mean, he had 10 years on it, and he'd never had an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
He was
Yeah,
just
if you're going to
yelping.
track the data anyways, at least use it to your advantage, right? Instead
Right.
of using it from the insights perspective that all three of you have done to really just get things going. So that's awesome. I know we have a few more minutes here, so if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the comments section. We'll get through those as well throughout. You can also reach out to any of us directly and go from there on things as well. So that's pretty awesome. And really just, let's see if there's any questions. If not, we'll wrap up. Cool. Awesome. So thank you all four of you, or three of you, Will, Brian, Marty, for joining in on things today. This was awesome. For anybody that really just wants to understand, where the industry is headed next, and the key takeaways from all of this really just come down to understanding that you're going to have to track this data anyways. And whether it's on paper logs, whiteboards, and spreadsheets, it really comes down to understanding that for proper growth and to really brew better beer and brew more beer, you need to have an all-in-one system that can really help you take it to the next level. And it's not just about putting things on a piece of paper. When you start diving in on ways to track efficiency, improve the overall quality, it comes down to the team effort that collectively you heard from, three breweries of all sizes: Brian, Will, Marty, ONCO Fermentations, the Brewing Projekt, and Pelican, just looking at it from a high level and just the day-to-day that goes into all of this. So if anybody's interested, wants to talk about things more, feel free to check us out at thefifthingredient.com. Feel free to shoot us a message online. More than welcome to reach out to these guys as well if they have any other questions and feedback. And this was awesome. Really appreciate it. Anything else you guys would like to add to this? No?
No.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you all. And looking forward to our next chat together. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Bye.
Cheers.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you all.